Hi, it's your friendly YouTuber Ben. This week, in honor of the new Spider-Man movie, I rewatched the old Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy that started in 2002. The insane amount of Bully Maguire memes I've watched over the last, I believe it was 2 years, may also have had something to do with that.
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
I haven't watched those movies for over 10 years, but I remember liking them a lot as a child, and no other Spider-Man movie has matched completely what in my head Spider-Man was supposed to be. Although being fair to them, my only point of reference was an animated show, and the movies as they kept coming. In order to have a better point of reference on evaluating them this time, I also read a bunch of Spider-Man comics. By the way, the first 2 issues are a great introduction to Peter Parker, and a lot of what made those chapters great is in the first Spider-Man movie. The stories are obviously different, but the message behind them and many of the key points are the same, or at least very similar. And I'm honestly very happy in general with these movies with regards to how they resemble the comic. And to those that believe movies should just be like the comics, I don't think it's a good idea in this case. The stories have very different durations, and the first 4 issues of Spider-Man, while they are great character-wise, they're not as exciting as the story of the movies. By the way, I will probably throw some Bully Maguire lines around in editing because I love the meme. The first movie revolves around Uncle Ben's sentence: with great power comes great responsibility. Peter gets his powers.
Shazam!
After that, Peter wants to enter a fighting challenge to get $3,000 to buy a car to impress Mary Jane. His uncle drove him there thinking he was going to study, attempting to have a heart-to-heart with Peter. During this heart-to-heart, Uncle Ben throws his magical line, but Peter however reacts poorly.
Stop lecturing me, please.
And he enters the competition after that. He completely succeeds, but the people at the event only pay him $100. Right after he leaves that guy's office, a robber goes inside and steals everything. And he lets him go as he leaves.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
So this thing that wasn't his problem came back to bite him. Because he let that man go, his uncle is now dead. The robber carjacked his uncle's car and shot him. Peter, angry, he wants revenge and he feels guilty. In the comics, it's very clear that the only people that pay any attention to him in his life are his aunt and uncle. Which should make the impact slightly bigger than in the movies, because in the movies he already has a friendship with Harry and a weird relationship with Mary Jane. However, I still think that death hits harder in the movies because Uncle Ben has a lot more screen time before it happens. And he really does seem like a great guy, and that does help us better understand the pain Peter is in. In his process of coping with his uncle's death and remembering his last words, he remembers the magical line and begins to understand that because he had the power to stop the robber, he should have. Since he's got superpowers, he has the power to do a lot of stuff, so he has the responsibility to do a lot of stuff as well. And so he became Spider-Man. Unluckily for him, that responsibility is put to the test throughout the movie. And the poor guy had no idea how far those responsibilities extended to. But it does have a nice side. Everybody except Jonah Jameson, one of the funniest guys in the movies, loves him. In trying to honor the last lesson his uncle gave him, Spider-Man truly becomes a hero. Being the modest and relatable person that he is, he gave himself the nickname Friendly Neighbor. The bad news, however, is that the rest of the trilogy we won't hear this magnificent line anymore.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Because now he understands that everything he can help with is his problem. As Spider-Man, he tries to save everyone, and while deep down he's Peter Parker and he does have more intense reactions to the people he does know being in danger, he still tries to save everyone when Green Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane and a bus or something full of kids. Despite the fact that trying to achieve both options was impossible with the Goblin there, he does, and he succeeded. But he got help. Green Goblin was attacked by the people in the bridge above them. That help he received was for helping the bus full of kids, so a man in the mob said. But I think probably one of the reasons he was being helped is because he is their friendly neighbor. And even Homer has helped Flanders when he really needed it. There is also something really odd about Peter as a superhero, and it's that his powers, and especially his responsibility, is often shown to be a problem for him. And this is constant through most of the trilogy. Most heroes also have problems with the double life or with hiding their powers, but Spider-Man is the most relatable one to me. I'm not a millionaire like Batman, Oliver Queen, or Tony Stark, and I don't have to hide Superman's powers, or even make sure I'm calm in case I transform into the Hulk. Sure, being able to beat Flash Thompson probably felt good to Peter, but a fight is always troublesome. And he got there because of lack of control with his powers. But he's also constantly late, tired, and has no time to get a job. Luckily, money is not that big a deal because he lives with the son of millionaire Norman Osborn. How lucky he is. Except for the fact that Norman is the Green Goblin, and Harry and Peter living together is also the reason the Goblin found out in the first place that he is Spider-Man, and that's why he kidnapped Mary Jane, like in the comics captured Gwen Stacy. And even after the Goblin accidentally kills himself, Peter learning that the Goblin used Mary Jane to lure him, made him decide at the end of the movie to not be with Mary Jane despite the fact that she now liked him, and he has been in love with her ever since he was 6 years old. But for the people who like romance, don't worry, there's still a great scene before the whole Goblin ordeal with the iconic upside down kiss. But it is with Peter saying no to Mary Jane where this movie ends and the next important theme in the trilogy starts: sacrifice. In this movie, the problems like being late and needing money come back. Unable to stop feeling responsible for everything, he is late to class, late in his job, and late to see Mary Jane in a play. And so his grades are falling behind, he gets fired from a pizza delivery job, and Mary Jane, who is getting married to Jameson's son, is angry at Peter. In case anyone forgot, he stopped bringing Jameson Spider-Man pictures because a big percentage of the people is starting to believe Spider-Man's bad, and Peter understandably doesn't like that. And his money problems are now serious. He lives in a very small and very crappy apartment which he doesn't have money to pay, and he's not the only one. The bank is closing Aunt May's house. Back in the first movie, money wasn't that big a deal, but he no longer lives with Harry Osborn because since his father's passing, he lives in his father's house. He also hates Spider-Man, holding him accountable for his father's death. And since Peter, is Spidey's official photographer, and Peter refuses to help him find him and get revenge, there's also a wedge between them. Let's summarize here. Because Spider-Man, Peter can get a job, Peter's grades are declining, Peter can't pay the rent or help Aunt May, and he's getting separated from his best friend and the woman he loves, who is getting married to Jameson's son. And to make it all just a little more annoying thanks to Jameson's efforts, part of the city is against Spidey.
Things, doesn't it?
Peter is failing at being Peter in everything. In his life, everything is falling apart and it's getting harder to be Spider-Man, and so this stress is giving Peter something I'm gonna call webtile dysfunction. And he does what any sane person with a secret identity and secret superpowers would do in these situations. Go to a doctor and tell him his friend dreams he's Spider-Man and his powers are fading. A very insightful doctor tells him that maybe his friend doesn't feel like he should be Spider-Man. Which brings us to the main problem Peter faces in this movie. There will be Spider-Man no more. Earlier in the movie we met Dr. Otto Octavius, a brilliant, fun, and somewhat charismatic man that became friends with Peter. He was trying to create cheap electricity for everyone. This man also believes his power, intelligence, meant he had that responsibility to the world, and he failed to create his dream, almost blowing up New York in the process, and he became controlled by the AI of his evil machine tentacles. At this point in the movie, he is trying to repeat his experiments, which as we know now could blow up New York, which is the main problem in the large scheme of things in the movie, but it's also him irresponsibly trying to fulfill his dreams, fitting perfectly with Peter giving up on being Spider-Man. Now Peter can get to class on time, he's getting his grades up, he's able to rest, and the most important thing to him, he can see Mary Jane acting. And afterwards, he convinced her that he had changed and that he could now be there for her. It seems like things are working out for him, but there's this bitter feeling we as an audience have, and I think that Peter has it too. Whenever we see the police try to do something and we see Peter ignore it, that's why he ended up entering a burning building and saves a baby. At this point in the movie, his Aunt May tells him that she feels guilty for what happened to Ben. And because of that, Peter explains everything that happened that day, minus the Spider-Man part. Peter clearly still feels guilty about it, and that's too much for his aunt, so she leaves the room. A few days later, Peter visits her aunt again, and she talks about how what happened when Ben died was water under the bridge to her. And they also talk about Spider-Man being gone, which results in Aunt May throwing the best speech in the entire trilogy. Talking about how Spider-Man inspires the hero inside of everyone, and pushes people to be true and honest, and helps them stand for what's right even if it means giving up on their dreams. After that, Peter's doubts about who he has to be are gone, and he's back taking his responsibility as Spider-Man. It's only after this happens that the large-scale problem, Dr. Otto Octavius, returns to create conflict. I'm going to try to fast forward. He kidnaps Mary Jane, we get the funniest scene in the movie, which is Jameson being like, "Oh, I feel so bad, Spider-Man's gone and he was good and I kicked him out. Too, he's a criminal, he stole my suit, I want him prosecuted," in less than a second. Then we get Dr. Octopus vs. Spider-Man, and the magnificent train scene in which everyone is inspired by Spider-Man to be a hero for a moment and try to protect him. Beautiful, and yet futile. Spider-Man lost. Octopus brought him to Harry so Harry could kill him. Harry finds out he's Peter. He kinda lets him go. Spider-Man vs. Octopus again, this time with a mini-sun going off. Spidey gets the win, making Octopus become Otto again. And this time Spider-Man removes his mask, and as Peter reminds him of the responsibility
Peter Parker.
he has for being such an intelligent man.
Brilliant but lazy.
That idea we already knew before. He tells him what he's just learned about sacrifice. Otto understands that he was being selfish and irresponsible, and literally sacrifices himself at the end to do the right thing, stopping the explosion. Closing the main message of this movie for the both of them. But the movie's not over yet. MJ was there when Parker was talking to Otto. She knows he's Spider-Man, and Peter explains to her that for her sake they can't be together. But a few scenes later, Mary Jane comes to Peter, basically saying, "I can take my own decisions, I can take that risk, and there's no reason for you to live only half a life." And they get together. As for the third movie, it doesn't have one clear core theme as the others do. I would say it is about forgiveness and acceptance with Venom, Sandman, and a little bit on Harry and Peter, but the final speech is about there always being a choice and their consequences. With Mary Jane, there's the putting someone else's needs over your own, but I feel like most of the screen time, or maybe just the most memorable or memeable time, maybe a pretext for drug addiction with the dark suit making Spider-Man feel good, but he's getting really more miserable inside. And there's also Harry, who in the comics takes LSD, and in the movies he's an alcoholic. Also took the Goblin Serum and hears voices because of it. Since it has so many, I'm gonna try and mix them all quickly. Peter had to fall low enough by hurting Mary Jane to give up on the suit, and he asks his aunt about forgiveness. And she tells him that's the hardest thing to do, and the first thing we have to do is forgive ourselves when we do something wrong. I don't actually recall in which point Peter forgave himself, or if they even hinted at that happening. He does, however, ask for forgiveness to Harry, more or less, and Harry does forgive him after he learns the truth about his father's death. As for the bad guys, Venom and Sandman are on this for revenge on Spider-Man. Eddie Brock wants revenge for what Peter did to him with the whole Daily Bugle fake picture stuff. And the Venom symbiote wants revenge for the whole church trying to kill the suit thing, whatever. And Sandman because Spider-Man is not letting him steal the money he wants to use to save his daughter. Sandman is also very relevant as Uncle Ben's killer. By the end of the movie, Eddie Brock and the symbiote die, Brock basically wanting to be Venom, which again, I don't know if this is an addiction pretext or not. Harry dies as a hero, protecting his best friend, and Sandman truly feels bad for everything that happens, including killing Uncle Ben, and Peter is able to forgive him, which to me would have been a great final scene, with the beginning of Peter's journey in the first movie being Uncle Ben's death and Peter feeling guilty over it, and now ending with forgiving the real killer. These movies are not by any means as exciting as the MCU movies we get nowadays, but in terms of the message they try to teach, I believe they do a better job and they also are better comic book adaptations. But to each their own, this is just my opinion. Leave a like and subscribe if you like the video, and if you don't hit the like,
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
I'm kidding. See you guys next time.